Bonjour. Bienvenidos. Welcome. My name is David. I co-chair this chapter of the Council of Canadians. I also will speak later on behalf of an organization called People for Peace London. But whatever organization we represent or don't represent, it is important to begin activities like this remembering that this work, like other work we do, like our daily lives in this community, all take place on traditional lands of Haudenosaunee, Anishinaabe, Chinangta, Neutral, and Nuna peoples. The peoples that were here before European colonists and settlers messed things up had a lot of things right and a lot of teachings, and we don't have time for all of those teachings tonight. But one important piece that I think is important to remember when we gather on these lands, that everything from what we call the Ottawa River to the Great Lakes was covered by a treaty between Haudenosaunee and Anishinaabe peoples who didn't always get along, but got along well enough to say, we will have a dish with one spoon covenant. We will have a treaty which says the land is enough to sustain us all. And there's three things, briefly, that we should recall from the dish with one spoon wampum covenant. One is that the land is enough to sustain us all if we all take what we need and not more. That we have to look after that one dish because we all eat from it, we're all sustained from it, so we have to not soil it, we have to leave it clean, leave it apt and suitable for supporting everybody. And when they came together, again, people who had not been on friendly terms, they came together and they literally had a meal when they celebrated this. We're not going to repeat that meal because it's hard to get beaver tail stew these days. But they came to the table with spoons, with one spoon to share, not with sharp-edged objects, deliberately signifying that we come together in peace, not to harm one another. So, hello? It's good? Okay. So that's another important lesson that we gather in the spirit of the dish with one spoon wampum, because the land is enough to sustain us all if we take care of it and if we take care of each other. With that, I'm going to hand it off to John Cartwright, who's national chair of the Council of Communities. John. It's all yeah. Now it's on. Oh yeah, actually, Siddharth. And then Meg. Want to make your way up here, Meg? It gives me pleasure to introduce my friend and sometime co-performer in different contexts, Siddharth.
Hi everyone, my name is Marge. David asked me to perform some poetry here for you today. And it's a little allegorical, and so I invite you to put your thinking hats on. But I've chosen two poems today that cover the full range of emotions.
No?
Okay, yeah, all right.
Keeps going on.
I'm gonna go tell from you.
Yes.
Maybe if it's just put in the saddle. Maybe
Maybe a battery. Yeah.
All right, let's get started. So this poem is titled Time and Tide. Aplenty, there's opportunity and determination. Someday humanity will be cosmic. We are trees without roots, falling over our own ambition. I'll project, yeah. Blind to all but sight, we look to you, all you constitute. Every cosm, micro and macro, to epitomize desire. We yearn counter to reality. Persistence akin to devil's sting. Acceptance is not surrender, forward is not up. These tools and contraptions we have birthed to understand you. But if we turn inward, they can spark revelation and indemnify exploration. Like the dome that surrounds us, we can thrive, but we must first survive. You see crisis and wonder why when we have the remedy. Denial and space are both our escape. My planetary ode is personification. My plea is internalization. There are galaxies within us and forces that connect us. We can be dreamers as our goals are utopic. Even a tedious path will place us on the stars. So we burrow and dig deep to find the launching pad that will set us free. Thank you. Another one I'm going to read. It is titled in Latin. The translation is the scientific name for the monarch butterfly and the greatest symbol. I love seeing monarchs fall, reeking of entitlement and vanity for what their kind did to us. Their suffering validates mine. They are tigers and wanderers, milkweeds and black-veined browns. It was an insult to cosmic balance to equate them to the scourge of humanity. Evoking grandeur and gravitas, I see the semblance with royalty, protected by the subjects, rewarding them with dreams. Habitats plundered and razed, banding human and creature, transcending understanding. They become ideas that we'll immortalize when all else fails. The heat death is inevitable, so we pursue our own. This moment will be primordial history when they spark revolution. I plead with space and time to see them rise again. Already the monarchs carry on. It is us who have fallen. Tiger, I look for your ferocity. Wanderer, I search for your freedom. Milkweed, I yearn for your color. Black-veined brown, I know you will save me. Thank you.
You want to speak? Right? You want to ask? Okay, so you can- It goes on names. We will have another few words from Meg Borthwick of the Council of Canadians, just after a pause for technical change here. Meg, over to you.
If we put it in the saddle.
What does what you mean by that?
Good evening, everybody. Marge Piercy is an American activist, feminist, a science fiction writer, and a poet. This is The Low Road. What can they do to you? Whatever they want. They can set you up, they can bust you, they can break your fingers, they can burn your brain with electricity, blur you with drugs till you can't walk, can't remember. They can take your child, wall up your lover. They can do anything you can't stop them from doing. How can you stop them? Alone? You can fight. You can refuse. You can take what revenge you can. But they roll over you. But two people fighting back to back can cut through a mob, a snake dancing file can break a cordon, an army can meet an army. Two people can keep each other sane, can give support, conviction, love, massage, hope, sex. Three people are a delegation, a committee, a wedge. With four, you can play bridge and start an organization. With six, you can rent a whole house and eat pie for dinner with no seconds and hold a fundraising party. A dozen make a demonstration, 100 fill a hall, 1,000 have solidarity and your own newspaper. 10,000 power and your own paper, 100,000 your own media, 10 million your own country. It goes on, one at a time. It starts when you care to act. It starts when you do it again, and they said no. It starts when you say we and know who you mean, and each day you mean one more.
Well, thank you both. That was a wonderful way to open, and David, your that acknowledgement was really important for us to think about. Meg and I didn't check on this, but last night I ended a conference call of leaders of the Council of Canadians across this country by a different poem by Marge, Piercy, an American feminist poet. And her book, Gone to Soldiers, is an incredible story of resilience, of people who went through a terrible time of resistance and came out to rebuild a better world. My name is John Cartwright. I'm the chairperson of the Council of Canadians. I was born here in 1953 at St. Joseph's Hospital. And I left and moved to Scarborough when I was 13 and grew up there and saw how we as Canadians coming from all over the world were trying to shape a better world. And then, like many of you, understood that we had forgotten to understand the original peoples. And we needed to go on a journey of truth first and then reconciliation. When I was, 50 years ago, in Scarborough, I met a man called Marshall Gans who was helping Cesar Chavez and the California farm workers. It was before I ever got to uni as a woodworker. But I was helping those Chicano farm workers try and find dignity in their life. And Gans became one of the best adult educators in the world. Through the power of narrative, people talking about their own journey of who they are, and then why we're in the room together, and then what it is we're called upon to do, the story of self, the story of us, and the story of now. And Marshall has a definition of leadership that's quite unique. See, I'm a construction worker. I'm a union leader, retired now. But we used to taking decisions, rallying people, and moving it forward. But Marshall's definition of leadership is enabling others to act for a common purpose in the time of uncertainty. And I think we all agree in this room, we're in a time of deep uncertainty. And that's why you've come here tonight. We know with unhinged tyrant south of the border that everything will change. And this feels like darker times from long ago. But we started a conversation with the Council of Canadians and with others in the environmental movement and racial justice and social justice movements back in the spring, deeply concerned about what we saw was going on in politics here. We saw that politics was changing. And that what we feared when the convoy came to Ottawa, with their flags, with their sense of purpose, and the joke was, well, they were meant to come for Trudeau, but they took out O'Toole instead. But the reality is they came to take out O'Toole and replace him with a much harsher version of right-wing populism as they went to Alberta and took out Jason Kenney to replace him with a much harsher version of right-wing populism and neoliberalism. And there's a playbook that Steve Bannon wrote for Donald Trump. Separation, culture wars, othering, longing for some other empire, where there was people that looked like me were the ones who made all decisions. And the people that look like so many of us here were kept out of that. And unfortunately, that playbook got translated into Canadian, and people like Nick Chavalis and Corey Tanyaki put a nice maple leaf stamp on it. And last spring, Pierre Poilievre looked like he was riding that momentum to become prime minister with a majority of government. And a lot of us have been talking about that over the spring and the summer. How do we stop that? How do we rail that? And so what we realized in the Council of Canadians and working with others in all those movements is we've got to create a space where people of goodwill can come together and figure this out. And we created something called the Canada We Want. And created that as a conversation document. And it's in front of you now. And that was because, you know, in the Fridays for Future, you see the Climate Action London is outside. Just think of those hundreds of thousands of young people that streamed out of their schools saying, how dare you, people of my age, ignored the climate crisis. But today, that's not top of mind. Those same people are not sure how they can pay to put a roof over their head, or how they can make enough money to buy the groceries for a week. And we have to acknowledge that there's a different conversation going on. And so, we wanted to figure out something. And we thought, let's make a space where people can bring their wisdom and their passion and start to figure out the answers here. Last Friday, I was in Ottawa, the first time in my life, speaking in the parliamentary gallery, launching something called Pledge Canada, with incredible allies. With Alex Himmelfarb, who was the Privy Council of Canada clerk, the top civil service position under 3 governments. With Charlie Angus, member of parliament from Timmins from the north. Some may say kick-ass Charlie Angus. With Mark Tewksbury, Olympic champion for Canada. With Jean Telliot, the great-grandniece of Louis Riel. And myself. Presenting a call to all Canadians to take a pledge for this country. A pledge based on an inclusive Canada based on social justice, on recognition of Indigenous rights, on recognition of the reality that we need to come together. And the question is, how do we build power? There's a fellow who's a professor, like I got high school and carpentry apprenticeship, but this fellow was a professor, Dennis Pillon, of political science. And he said, democracy is actually about the ability of ordinary people, working people and ordinary people, to shape the future we want. That's democracy. It's not how Elon Musk describes democracy. It's not how Donald Trump describes democracy. It's not how the oil companies here describe democracy. And there's another fellow I want to quote in Indian, Frederick Douglass, leader in the abolitionist movement through the United States, came to Canada many times, and he said that those in power can see nothing without a demand. And what we're here tonight to do is to ask you in the tables to figure out what is our demands as ordinary people, as good people of London, and how do we create the power to build a better and more just future for all of us, for our kids, for our grandkids, for our neighbors, and for people we don't know yet, but want to be Canadians. So we have an amazing panel here tonight, and then we're going to give you time to talk. I'm going to introduce our first speaker, and then I'll introduce each one at a time. Tina Stevens is with the London District Labour Council Vice President. She's an Algonquin member, Argitiganzabi First Nation, and also connected as an Ojibwe woman from Kettle and Stony Point. Tina belongs to the Loon clan, which is strongly connected to the position she has held in relation to her employment, her union, and Indigenous groups. Tina is past president of the Cooperative Housing Federation of Canada, which is a pretty damn good thing when we think about housing for all. A recording secretary for OPSU's Indigenous Circle, past equity executive member for OPSU, SEPO in the Indigenous Circle, and the first vice president of London District Labour Council. Please welcome Tina Stevens.
I know that in systems that we have established, that being able to speak to people, I find in regards to it's nothing negative, because the fact that I know John is a very good activist, but as our Indigenous teachings that I have behind me, is that I'm here to sit with you, as opposed to hovering over you and standing up. Because the fact that your rights in our equality as a person of humanity has to be equal, to be able to make sure that we're all treated well and treated equally in the Indigenous circle that we have in our medicine wheel. So I'll be sitting down in terms of for my speaking this evening. I'm very grateful to be invited by the Council of Canadians to speak on emergent issues impacting Indigenous peoples, along with our labor movement. Anian Bojo, Mimits Nadijnakas. And as John had related, I'm a member of the Kitikin First Nation and a part of the Loon Clan. Today, we must rise up and implement calls to action to address the attacks on our democracy, the systemic racism towards Indigenous peoples, and the threats on our inherent treaty rights. For the labor movement, we juggle multiple jobs, yet we're still broke. We work our entire lives and still can't afford to retire. We do all the right things to get ahead, but groceries, housing, and other essentials fall further out of our reach. At every opportunity, big corporations hike the price of things we need for profit. Instead of making life more affordable, our governments vote against it and push cuts to the programs and services we rely upon. We must continue to resist the implementation of further privatization. The only people benefiting are the elite corporations and friends of the current government and Donald Trump. The impacts on Indigenous people and the labor movement. We need to protect our treaty rights and border mobility rights and the impact of these harmful tariffs on our inherent and treaty rights. There will be direct impacts on our border mobility and our right to maintain our spiritual, cultural, political, economic, and social relations with Indigenous peoples across borders. We need to ensure that First Nations voices are heard, our rights upheld, and our freedoms protected. We need to renew our call to action for Canada's First Ministers to include First Nations leadership in their ongoing strategic discussions regarding border issues, Arctic sovereignty, and Canada's response to those short-sighted tariffs. Poilievre would only continue to make Indigenous peoples as just another minority group, and alongside Doug Ford, would directly attack our lands, resources, and water. The water that provides us life, that predate any colonial systems, ultimately for profit. For the labor movement, we need good jobs for all. With the continuing rise in prices and cost of groceries, housing, and medical costs, poverty is on the rise. We now have an affordability crisis across many fronts, along with food insecurity. Our workers are now having to work 2 and 3 jobs just to provide for their families. We know with each successive government, our labor rights continue to be eroded or eliminated. We know Doug Ford and Pierre Poilievre are not friends to the labor movement, and big corporations would be able to have a heavier influence to maintain poverty wages and the erosion of any meaningful pensions and benefits. The erosion of democracy. Over many years, we have experienced a decline in our democracy. We have weakened our democratic institutions, such as the peaceful transition of power or free and fair elections, or the violation of individual rights, which include racism and our human rights, especially in the area of freedom of expression. Our elections are being influenced by the use of misinformation. As we have seen to ourselves, democratic values have been on the decline. We have experienced economic inequality, rampant culture conflicts, and the backlash to societal changes that would improve the quality of life for all and not just a few. Labor rights would continue to be exploited, and the importance of our public services would be weakened and devalued. Our democracy is in crisis. It is most worrisome time for the future, as young people who have not been educated on the long struggles against fascism and other right-wing movements may be losing faith in our democratic structure as they struggle to maintain a good quality of life. The very idea of democracy and its promotion has been tarnished among many, contributing to a very dangerous apathy among many Ontarians and Canadians. We need change, and we need it now. The rise in hate. Since 2016, we have had a pronounced spike in hate crimes and coincided with the rise of populist politics and inflammatory rhetoric and denialism toward immigrant, Black, and Indigenous peoples. There was a further spike as a result of the onset of the COVID-19 pandemic. Hate crimes have continued to rise involving peoples of race, ethnicity, religion, sexual orientation, sex, and gender, and towards people who have mental or physical disabilities. These will continue to rise until we have strong enough language to deal with hate speech. There needs to be more definitive laws to address hate speech, which is conveyed through many forms of expression that exist on many of the social platforms today, of gestures or symbols and misinformation that has not been fact-checked. Hate speech is discriminatory or pejorative towards many of our most vulnerable groups here in Ontario and across Canada. This includes describing certain groups as animals or genetically inferior. The beliefs that white privileged people have had to deal with more struggles as the appearance of rights for many cultural and minority groups have risen. There's been a significant rise in the denying, minimizing, or celebrating past persecution or tragedies that happened historically in Ontario and Canada. We've seen the consistent blame for problems like crime and disease. We have seen as demonstrated by our public leaders here in Canada, Ontario, and across the border, there is a rise in the sentiment that this is a free country. I can say whatever I want. We have demonstrated this understanding through the rights to protest or to convey a point of view and have the right to do so, even if the viewpoints are considered to be offensive by others. To this, we have to find ways to change the dialogue across all of our provinces and Canada as a whole. So in conclusion, we need to address consistently in public the impacts on the attack on the rights of Indigenous peoples, Canadians, and Ontarians. We need to protect the democratic values and rights for all peoples. Quite frankly, if these rights are eroded and we become the 51st state, we will have to deal with more injustices due to the lack of strengths within our current legal and justice system. Now is the time to educate the public and to address the apathy that now exists. And finally, we need to address the rise in hate and racism through misinformation related to fake news. We need to make sure voters are able to get out and vote for fairness in the upcoming inappropriate and expensive Ontario election. Even more, we must ensure that Pierre Poilievre is not elected into government, who will have a major impact on our labour movement and Indigenous peoples here in Canada. Thank you again for the opportunity to speak out. We have to rise on all levels. The need is severe. We need to stand up in a way we have never experienced before. We need the Canada we want. We pledge.
Thank you so much, Tina, for your incredible words of wisdom and sharing. And I hope all of us will be thinking about those words all through as we're sleeping tonight and tomorrow and the day after. Our next speaker is Lizzie Ketchum. Lizzie is from Fridays for Future, is a high school student and environmental advocate involved in sustainability initiatives and community action. She has worked with climate organizations, led environmental projects, and supports youth engagement in environmental issues. Liz.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Lizzie, and I'm here because climate action isn't just an abstract issue that we hear on the news. It's personal. It's about our future, our communities, and our responsibility to act while we still have time as stewards of this land. We've already seen the warning signs: record-breaking heat waves, severe storms that flood our streets, air quality warnings from wildfires burning thousands of kilometers away. This isn't normal. And yet, our government continues to approve and invest in fossil fuel projects and delay real solutions. We do not have the luxury of waiting. The facts are clear. If we do not drastically cut emissions by 2030, we lock ourselves into a future of unlivable heat, food insecurity, and environmental collapse. But this isn't just about avoiding disaster. It's about the kind of Canada, of our futures, we want to build. One that invests in clean energy, creates thousands of green jobs, and prioritizes people over profit. Canada is one of the world's biggest polluters per capita. We talk about being a climate leader, but we still subsidize oil and gas with billions of taxpayer dollars. Imagine if that money was spent on better public transit, making cities like London walkable and bike-friendly, and supporting sustainable farming instead of destructive industrial agriculture. Imagine empowering workers to transition to renewables instead of leaving them behind. Right here in London, we've seen what's possible. Climate groups set up all around here have worked tirelessly for change. But to tackle this crisis, we need governments at all levels to put the issue at the top of their agendas and act, not just talk. We need something else too. Bold policy changes and a collective shift, all of us, towards sustainability. People from all backgrounds, all ages, and all walks of life have been leading this fight, including some of us here. Organizing climate strikes, demanding action, and refusing to accept empty promises. But we can't do it alone. We need real political will. We need elected officials to be brave enough to stand up to fossil fuel interests and make bold policy changes despite party lines. So what can we do? We demand action. We pressure our leaders, we organize, we show up at city hall meetings, push for sustainable policies in our school and workplaces, and refuse to let climate action be ignored. And we remind everyone that climate action isn't just an environmental issue. It's about health, jobs, social justice, and the future of every single person in this country. The Canada we want is possible, but only if we fight for it. So let's demand it. Let's build it. And let's make sure that when future generations look back, they see these moments as the turning point. These moments, we chose action over excuses. Thank you.
You can see why the planning committee asked me to come here, Lizzie to come here and speak. Because just, I wish when I was in grade 10, I had such an ability to bring a message. And you know, when you talk about action, I come out of construction. In the 90s, a third of our members were unemployed when the real estate crash came. We had people losing homes, committing suicide, family breakups. It was terrible. But we worked with some environmentalists and we took leaders in the city of Toronto, like a guy called Peter Tabbins, who'd been with Greenpeace. Now he's an MPP. And he moved a motion at Toronto City Council to create a Better Buildings Partnership to do retrofits. 46,000 person years worth of work from one municipal program. People who were stuck in their apprenticeships were able to get back and finish their trade. People who were about to lose their homes were able to get back and have a job. And so connecting the passion for climate justice and saying to people, this ain't a scary thing. We can have jobs and justice and climate justice at the same time. I just hope you're able to keep your voice going with so much passion. Thank you, Lizzie, so much for what you're saying. Well, thanks. I think many of you know he's been an activist for public health care and many other issues for almost 20 years with the London Health Coalition, the Council of Canadians, and the London Regional Social Forum. He has degrees in nursing and chemistry. He is inspired by the World Social Forum, books by Naomi Klein, Maud Barlow, and David Suzuki, and more recently has been particularly interested in fighting for affordable housing. He's traveled all over the world and been to many remarkable lectures by people such as Dr. Bandar, Dr. Jane Goodall, Chris Hedges, Dr. Suzuki, Cornel West, Tony Robbins, etc. One of his favorite quotes is by Margaret Mead. Never underestimate the ability of a few people to change the world. It's the only thing that ever has. Jeff.
Thanks so much. So I think the greatest, or the most important thing is that the situation is critical in our healthcare system. Ontario patients can't take another 4 years of healthcare cuts, closures, shortages, and privatization. We have to get out and vote to protect and improve our public healthcare system, or we're going to lose it. Doug Ford currently is privatizing core hospital services, and if that happens, as he's doing it now, when he gets back in, U.S. corporations can bid on all they can buy up our entire health care system, rent it back to us at a premium, and then they can make sure anybody with their profits, anybody who runs for office in the future, if they further their interests, they can be funded, and we lose our government, but we lose our healthcare system, we also lose our economy. Our greatest strength and asset we have as Ontarians and Canadians was the decision to deliver healthcare based on need and not ability to pay. It's what sets us apart from the US. It increases equality and decreases income inequality. Our grandparents fought tooth and nail to get it, and if we don't spread the word and vote February 27th, we're gonna lose it. The Americans would love to control our healthcare system. Dr. Day owned one of the biggest private clinics. He was audited and had $500,000 at his private clinic in user fees and double dipping and extra billing. And he probably should have been fined or gone to jail, but he sued. And luckily he lost at the Supreme Court, but he was supported through the back door by the Koch brothers in the States, the Fraser Institute, the Canadian Constitution Foundation. So luckily we won that site, but now Mr. Ford is, he's funding like a private clinic. His ex-health minister lobbies for a clinic in Toronto that's being paid twice the price per surgery as public hospitals get. So that's a big concern. Since he's gone into office, he's diverted over $2 billion from public health care to the for-profit private healthcare sector. There are 1.2 million more people waiting for doctors. Recently, over 1,000 lined up in Walkerton to get a doctor. There's 1,000 more people waiting on stretchers in hallways per day, and he promised to fix this and did not. There have been 1,200 ER closures just last year, which is unprecedented. Ford limiting nurses to a 1% raise and then underfunding hospitals has led to many leaving the profession and massive deficits. He's done a lot of cutting since he's got into office, as well as in all sectors. Our hospitals are overcrowded and operating at 110% capacity, underfunded by about $12 billion, according to a comparison to other provinces that puts us dead last on per capita basis.
Shameful.
LHSC has a $150 million deficit at the moment. There's a huge risk of privatization there. I work in a public hospital currently, and I recently showed up to work. It's a 50-bed hospital, but yet we had 69 patients, and they weren't even letting me have a PSW to help me. They said, well, you know, you don't need it, so they won't show up till 9 o'clock. Well, most of the major care has been done in the morning. And I find when even there's a PSW there, I need more than what's there. So the cuts are really affecting the front lines. I'm a RN. So I mentioned the biggest danger of U.S. two-tier healthcare is they can buy up our entire system. But there's also, there was a guy named Robert Tremomus, 2010. He put out an article, and in his article he said, is our economy sustainable without Medicare? So he made the point that private care costs more, there's more deaths, worse outcomes, it's less regulated, they use less regulated care providers, it leads to tens of thousands of nurses, a shortage. We already have a huge shortage, it makes it worse, and wait times are actually longer if we privatize. So those are many of the bad things. As the Health Coalition, we've organized about 6 or 7 debates in the last 15, 20 years, one for each election. We asked the Conservatives many times to show up, and they showed up for 1 out of the 6. And at one time they said, why would you want federal candidates to debate healthcare? So, you know, why indeed? So, sorry, I'm just trying to. So, why indeed? It's because the feds provide the funding and need to tie it to enforcing the Canada Health Act and national standards to decrease wait times, for example. There's numerous private clinics and most charge user fees, which are illegal. And our businesses compete with US businesses because they pay $1,000 more per employee for their healthcare system. So it will devastate our economy to have it taken over. You know, profits will be even taken out of the country. So it devastates our economy, we lose our democracy, and we lose our greatest asset that sets us apart from the Americans. Even public-private partnerships, they cost us $8 billion compared to how it would have cost publicly. So another thing is that they'll say, well, we should go to a fee-for-service model instead of a global funding model. And the NHS did this in Britain, and what happened was it fragmented care, and so you'd have to go here to, if you could do the most knees, you'd get the contract. So there were worse outcomes in the clinics. You had to go different places for like knee surgery or eye surgery, fragmented care, and now they've come full circle and determined that they want comprehensive global funding in hospitals because it's really affected their system. And women and children, maternal care and cancer care, because they don't make a profit, they don't get funded as much. So those are really, it's really a bad thing to privatize. We're going to lose public health care if we don't vote to protect it. So what do? Well, neoliberalism, Naomi Klein's shock doctrine book has talked about the policies of the extreme right, decrease social spending, decrease taxes, privatize and regulate, and how it's increased, made more people wealthy. It's made the rich richer and the poor poorer. So the Nordic countries, if you read a book called the Spirit Level, they have a progressive tax system. They charge the rich and corporations more, and it levels the playing field. It decreases, it actually reverses the effects of neoliberalism. You know, you have less mental illness, less crime, less infant mortality, teen pregnancy, all the social ills are better, it raises boats. So we need to fight neoliberalism, but one of the other things we need to do is electrify the third rail. So Ralph Klein, I guess in Alberta, he tried to privatize healthcare, and everybody and their dog went to the legislature and said, you're not doing this. So he had to back off. And when he celebrated that they didn't move towards privatization, he said public healthcare is the third rail of Canadian politics. In the rail yard, the third rail is electrified. So you have to make it so if politicians reach out to make money or benefit from our public health care system, they get electrified. Like when she, I mean metaphorically. Sorry. When wind privatized half our healthcare, half our hydro, she got 7 seats the next election. So we need to electrify the third rail, which means we need to make everybody in Ontario know that this election is about public health care, not tariffs. And how Ontario public health care goes, the rest of Canada goes. So I just want to implore everyone to, electrify the third rail with me.
We could open up a whole kind of worms around that, but I'm going to call on Patty Dahl, President of the Labour Council, to talk to you a little bit about how we're going to go into conversations now. Patty, do you want to come up?
Are we doing David has to speak?
Oh,
I will be David's listening.
that fellow in the white t-shirt. I'm sorry, I wasn't reading my notes correctly. David Heap is a teacher, researcher in French studies and linguistics, affiliate faculty with gender, sexuality, and women's studies at Western. David is co-chair of the London chapter of the Council of Canadians. He participates in the Political Action Committee of the London District Labour Council and organizes the Faculty for Palestine, the Canadian Boat to Gaza, Freedom Flotilla Coalition, as well as People for Peace in London. David, thank you so much for all you do, and let's hear.
Unlike my friends, I didn't bring notes, which is dangerous. It's an occupational hazard of my workplace that people like me talk too much when you give us a mic, but I will be brief. How do we pay for the hospitals that Jeff has, and all the healthcare workers to make them work that Jeff was talking about? How do we pay for the Canada we want that's on the table in front of you? A lot of folks are talking about a current president in the country south of us. I would like to cast mine back long before my time. Few of you will remember in the early 1950s, Eisenhower made a very important speech when he said that every gun, every bullet, every warplane, every warship is ultimately theft from those who hunger and who are not fed, those who are cold and are not housed, and those who are unclothed, and those who need the services. That was true then, and he actually had the equation, so many houses per warship, so many hospitals per warship. The equation have just gotten more and more obscene over the years. The drums are beating now, have been for years, to raise Canada's military spending to 2% of GDP. And of course, a terrible idea already, but now politicians are getting on board saying, we're gonna get there, we're gonna get there. And of course, the goalpost moves, and the Orange Menace says, no, it should be 5%, with his usual ridiculous bluffing tactics. All of this rhetoric is designed to make our ruling elites fall in line with the agenda of the arms merchants, because that industry is one of the most profitable sectors, besides the financial sector, which produces nothing, the most profitable sector, because they produce stuff that's only there to kill and harm people. There's a quote that keeps going across the screen here. If we have money to kill people, from Tommy Douglas, right? If we have money to kill people, we can find money to help people. But we can't do both, friends. The economy, like everything else in life, is a matter of choices. If we accept that bully tactic that says 1.5%, 2.5%, 3%, 5% of GDP has to go to death machines and death industries, we cannot make the choices for the Canada that we want. What's on the sheet in front of you, what Jeff and others have been talking about. We won't have the resources for the green retrofit. We won't have the resources for all the important jobs that Tina was talking about. So these are choices, and we cannot accept the bully tactics which say constantly raise military spending. As an alternative, because I sit on a political action committee and a labor council, yes, there are a lot of jobs in what are called the arms industries. Since I was in high school, it was a number of decades ago, it had already been proven by the American Machinists Union that funding arms contracts is the least efficient way of expending national funding, government funding, bar none, if you're looking at jobs. Because when you spend on that, it goes away to the military. When you spend on anything else, it creates something that's used in the community. Our factories that are producing death machines, whether they're going to Saudi to kill Yemenis or Bahrainis or other Saudis, or to any other customer, they're not being used in our communities. Those same factories used to produce heavy transport equipment that was used to make this country run. If we're going to have a green transformation, we have to make the choice to say, that factory, those factories that were retooled for the arms industry, it is our collective responsibility. It's not the responsibility only of the workers who work there or the unions that represent them. It's our collective responsibility to fund retooling them for the green transition that this country needs. So we've got a choice, folks. Weapons or windmills. I know which choice mine is. Is it transport or is it tanks? My choice is for the transport. My choice is for the midfield. My choice is to radically decrease the funding and demand politicians face that choice. Are you going to fund human needs or are you going to fund the killing of humans? Yes. That's the choice that we have to put to politicians. Thank you.
Taken back by the needy. We come from the country and we come from the city. Play us on a record, you can play us on a CD. All the shit you're giving us is fertilizer. This is what you plan, you can never go in this. A corporation, you can never globalize it. Like Peter Tosh said, legalize it. Words and poison, the bass and the treble. Rumbling the speakers in and make you want to rebel. Throw your hands up, take it to another level. And you never ever make it, you know what the devil shall fight. Come on. Revolution never saves money. Revolution never costs the water.
Well, I know. We just suggest no, sorry. We have to work for everybody. Oh, yeah, gosh. Alright, there's gonna be some trainings anyways. Didn't,
So after we talk to the